Hello and welcome to this video in my Introduction to Business series. In this lesson we will be going over the topic of choosing a form of business ownership. So this content is going to focus on the three most common forms of business ownership: the sole proprietorship, the partnership, and the corporation. And along the way we'll introduce a number of basic business terms. We will also look at the process of when we go to become a corporation, that process that we call incorporation, and examine the role of a corporation's board of directors. We'll talk about limited liability companies and other special forms of business ownership. Let's start out with the sole proprietorship. The sole proprietorship is the simplest form of business ownership and the easiest one to start. A sole proprietorship is a business that is owned and usually operated by a single person. Although a few sole proprietorships are large and have many employees, most are small. Now, currently there are around 24 million sole proprietorships that exist just here in the United States. Some of today's largest corporations, including Walmart, started out as a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships are the most popular form of ownership at around 70% of the U.S. total business firms. Now, when compared to the other two ownerships, that being partnerships and corporations, sole proprietorships rank last in sales revenues at around 4% of total annual sales, which is over $1 trillion annually. The main reason that people will start a business is to fulfill their desire for independence and the ability to make their own decisions by creating a sole proprietorship. When making this decision, though, as individuals, you must apply or must always keep in mind the current state of the economy and how that state of the economy is going to affect that decision to start a sole proprietorship. So let's look at advantages and disadvantages of the sole proprietorship. Now, the first advantage is the ease of startup and its closure. Registering for the name of the business and obtaining licenses and permits are the only real legal requirements to start a business, and this does not require an attorney to do such. The second advantage is the pride of ownership. The amount of time and hard work that you as an owner is going to invest in a sole proprietorship is very substantial, and the owner deserves a great deal of credit for assuming all the risks and solving all the problems associated with operating sole proprietorships. The third advantage is the retaining of all the profits. All profits earned by a sole proprietorship become the personal earnings of that owner. Thus, the owner has a strong incentive to succeed in that business. The fourth advantage is going to be there are no special taxes. The sole proprietor's profits are taxed as personal income of that owner. Thus, sole proprietorships do not pay any type of special state and federal income taxes that those corporations do. And the last advantage is the flexibility of being your own boss. The sole owner of a business is completely free to make decisions about the firm's operations. A sole proprietor can move a shop's location, open up a new store, or simply close an old one. Now, the disadvantages. With the first disadvantage, this is the unlimited liability. Unlimited liability is just a legal concept that holds a business owners personally liable for all of a business's debts. If that business fails, the sole proprietor's personal property, including their personal savings and other personal assets, can be seized to pay its creditors. The next disadvantage is the lack of continuity. Legally, the sole proprietor is that business. If the owner retires or they die or is declared legally incompetent, the business essentially ceases to exist. The third disadvantage we're going to talk about here is the lack of money. Banks, suppliers, and other lenders are often unwilling to lend large sums of money to sole proprietorships. The limited ability to borrow can prevent you as a sole proprietor from growing or expanding your business. The fourth disadvantage of a sole proprietorship is the sole proprietor often is the sole manager. In addition to being the sole salesperson, the buyer, the accountant, and on occasion even maybe the janitor, you have a limited management skill. This can cause the business to suffer in areas which you're, as an owner, may be less knowledgeable. So if you're not real strong in some of the basic business skills, you could have those limited management skills and thus fail or struggle. And then the fifth is a difficulty in hiring employees. The sole proprietor may find it hard to attract and keep competent help. Potential employees may feel that there's no room for advancement in your business, or whose owner assumes all managerial responsibility and doesn't delegate any of that work. Now, if we're looking beyond the sole proprietorship, the major disadvantage of the sole proprietorship is the limited amount that one person can do in any given day. One way to reduce the effect of this disadvantage is to have more than one owner. And to do this, we'll now take a look at partnerships. The form of a business ownership we should really understand here is the partnership. The U.S. Uniform Partnership Act defines this form of business ownership as a voluntary association of two or more persons to act as co-owners of a business for profit. We have over 3 million partnerships here in the U.S. Now, while these partnerships only represent about 10% of total American businesses, they make up around $5 trillion in sales each year. Now, when it comes to partnerships, there's generally two types of partnerships. There are the general partners. A general partner is just a person who assumes full or even some shared responsibility for operating a business. General partners are active in the day-to-day business operations, and each partner can enter into contracts on behalf of the other partners. They also assume unlimited liability for all the debts, including debts incurred by any other general partner without his or her knowledge or consent. Now, to avoid liability, a general partner who withdraws from the partnership must give notice to your creditors, customers, and suppliers of the partnership. The other type of partner in a partnership is called limited partners. A limited partner is a person who contributes capital to a business but who has no management responsibility or liability for losses beyond their investment in the partnership. A general partner is going to collect fees and receive percentages of the profits. Limited partners receive a portion of the profits and those tax benefits. Special rules apply to limited partnerships intended to protect customers and creditors who deal with them. Now, a very important document here is the partnership agreement. This is also called the Articles of Partnership, and it's an agreement that lists and explains the terms of the partnership. Now, when entering into a partnership agreement, partners would be very wise to let a neutral third party assist in the creation of this. A partnership should state such items as who is in agreement and who will make those final decisions, what each partner's duties will be, the investment each partner should make, how much profit or loss the partner receives, or who is responsible for what. And another thing that should be included in your partnership agreement is what happens if a partner wants to dissolve the partnership or if they die. Let's take a look at the advantages of partnerships. The first one is the ease of startup. Partnerships are relatively easy to form. As with sole proprietorships, legal requirements are often limited to registering the name of the business and purchasing of any licenses or permits that are necessary in your area. The second advantage is the availability of capital and credit. Because partners can pool their funds, a partnership usually has more capital available than does an individual who's starting a sole proprietorship. This, coupled with the general partner's unlimited liability, can form the basis of a better credit rating. The third advantage is the personal interest. General partners are very concerned with the operation of the firm, perhaps even more so than sole proprietors. They are responsible for the actions of all other general partners, as well as for their own actions. The fourth advantage is the combined business skill and knowledge. Partners often have complementary skills. The weakness of one partner in a certain area may be offset by another partner's strengths and a different type of area, so they can combine their skills to make this partnership much more attractive and effective. Retention of profits is our next advantage. As in a sole proprietorship, all profits belong to the owners of that partnership. And then the last advantage I'll talk about is the no special taxes advantage. Like a sole proprietor, each partner is taxed only on his or her share of the profits. Now, when we look at disadvantages, our first disadvantage of a partnership is with the unlimited liability. Each general partner is legally and personally responsible for the debts and taxes and actions of any other partner, even if that partner did not incur those debts or do anything wrong. Limited partners, however, risk only their original investment. Today, many states allow partners to form a limited liability partnership, or an LLP. And this is in which a partner in the business may have limited liability protection from any type of legal action resulting from the malpractice or negligence of other partners. Now, the second one is our management disagreements that can occur in a partnership. This is a disadvantage because most of the problems that develop in a partnership involve one partner doing something that disturbs the other's partner or partners. Now, when partners disagree about decisions, policies, or ethics, distrust can build up to the point where it's impossible to operate the business successfully. Our third disadvantage is that of the lack of continuity. A partnership is terminated if any one of the general partners dies, withdraws, or is declared legally incompetent. The fourth disadvantage is that of frozen investments. It's easy to invest money in a partnership, but it is sometimes quite difficult to get it out. The partnership agreement should outline the procedure for buying out a partner. Now, beyond the partnership, the main advantage of a partnership over a sole proprietorship are the added capital and management expertise of the partners, but they do share some of the same advantages. In our third form of business, we're going to discuss the corporation and how it overcomes many of the disadvantages that we've seen here with the partnerships and the sole proprietorships. The third form of business ownership I want to discuss is the corporation. A corporation is an artificial person that's created by law with most of the legal rights of a real person, including the right to start and operate a business, to buy or sell property, to borrow money, to sue or even be sued, and to enter into binding agreements. Remember, this is an artificial person. There are approximately 5 million corporations in the United States, so nearly 6 million corporations that exist here in the U.S. The corporation, as a form of business, comprises less than 20% of all total businesses in the U.S., yet they account for over 80% of sales revenues. Well, when we talk about corporations, we need to talk about corporate ownership. Corporate ownership, a type of security that represents parts of ownership of a corporation, are called stock. And those who own the shares or who help own that corporation are called stockholders. People often interchange the terms stocks and shares in conversation, but there is a difference between the two terms. To keep it simple, stocks are divided into shares. A share is simply the smallest denomination of a company's stock. Let's talk about the different types of corporations. We have a closed corporation, and this is a corporation whose stock is owned by relatively few people who are closely associated with the business, and it is not bought and sold on any type of security exchange. This is something referred to as a privately held company, or you might even hear it called a family corporation. An example would be Mars Incorporated, which is a global candy, pet food, and food product manufacturer that is 100% family owned. Some examples of a non-U.S. closed corporation would be IKEA, which is out of Sweden, Germany's Aldi as a grocery retailer, and even Lego, which comes from Denmark. The next one we talk about, the other type of corporation, is an open corporation. And this is a corporation whose stock is sold to the general public and can be purchased by any individual. And these are the type of corporations you're probably used to having interactions with, such as Nike and General Electric. Their stocks or their ownership is sold to the public and be purchased by companies and individuals. Well, as a stockholder, you need to know your rights. So let's take a look at stockholders' rights. There are two basic kinds of stock. There's common stock and there is preferred stock. Owners of common stock may vote on corporate matters. Now, owners of preferred stock usually don't have any type of voting rights, but their claims on the dividends are paid before those of common stock owners. Generally, smaller corporations are just going to issue common stock. When it comes to forming a corporation, the process of forming that corporation is called incorporation. To do this, it is highly recommended that when you go to do so, that a lawyer be consulted when beginning the incorporation process. And there's some questions that need to be asked, such as where to incorporate. A business is allowed to incorporate in any state that it chooses. Obviously, most small and medium-sized businesses are incorporated in the same state where they do most business. Now, the decision on where to incorporate usually is based on one of two factors, or on both. The cost of incorporating in one state compared with the cost of incorporating in some other state. And the advantage of taxes is another one of those decisions or factors that we put into our decision. The advantages and disadvantages of each state's corporate laws and tax structures are going to affect our decision on where to incorporate. Another question is, where are we going to incorporate? It's because some states are more hospitable than others, and they are going to offer benefits to attract different firms. They may have fewer restrictions. And when we look at these, we have two different types. Are we going to form a domestic corporation? This is a corporation that's in that state in which it is incorporated. And the other type is the foreign corporation. This is a corporation in any state in which it does business except the one that it's incorporated in. Some examples of these would be Sears Holding Corporation. The parent company of Sears and Kmart is incorporated in Delaware in the United States, where it is a domestic corporation, but any other state that those businesses exist for that corporation are considered a foreign corporation. Another one we can look at here is the Alien Corporation. The Alien Corporation is chartered by foreign governments and conducted their business in the United States. You've seen lots of examples of these alien corporations that are chartered by those foreign governments to the U.S., but they're doing their business or conducting their business here in the U.S., such as Volkswagen and Samsung are just a couple of examples. Now, let's take a look at the corporate charter. Once a home state has been chosen for the incorporation process, the incorporators must submit articles of incorporation to the Secretary of State of that state. You'll also hear the corporate charter referred to as the Articles of Incorporation. And it's simply a contract between the corporation and the state in which that state recognizes the formation of the artificial person that is the corporation. And it usually includes some of the following: the firm's name and address, obviously. The incorporators' names and addresses, the purpose of that corporation that's being incorporated, the maximum amount and types of stock that may be issued by the corporation to the public, rights and privileges of its stockholders, as well as a length of time the corporation may exist. Make sure that if you're ever working on one of these, you include at a minimum each of these pieces of information. Now, as the last step in forming a corporation, the incorporators and stockholders meet to adopt a corporate bylaw and elect a board of directors. The board of directors is the top governing body of a corporation. The directors are elected by the stockholders and can be chosen either from within or outside of the corporation. The major responsibilities of the board of directors are to set company goals, to develop general plans for meeting those goals, and to appoint corporate officers. Corporate officers vary, but have such positions as the chairman of the board, president, lots of different executive vice presidents, perhaps a corporate secretary or administrative assistant, a treasurer, as well as any other type of top-level executives that they feel are needed. These officers help the board make plans. They help them carry out the strategies that are established by the board, the hiring of employees, and managing the day-to-day business activities. Well, now that we have a good feel of what corporations are, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of forming corporations. The first advantage is limited liability. One of the most attractive features of a corporation or a corporate ownership is that of limited liability. If a corporation fails, creditors have a claim only on the assets of the incorporation or of the corporation, that invisible person. The next advantage is the ease of raising capital. The corporation is an effective form of business ownership and can raise capital. Corporations can not only borrow money but also raise additional sums of money by selling ownership or stock of the corporation. The third one is the ease of transfer of ownership. Ownership is transferred when shares of stock are sold, and practically no restrictions apply to the sale and purchase of stock issued by an open corporation. Perpetual life is also an advantage because a corporation is essentially a legal person. It exists independently of its owners and it survives them, so it does not cease to exist if one of the partners dies. And then the last one is specialized management. Typically, corporations are able to recruit far more skilled, knowledgeable, and talented managers than sole proprietorships and partnerships. Now, the disadvantage side. The first disadvantage of corporations is the difficulty and expense of the formation of the corporation. Forming a corporation can be a relatively complex and very costly process. The second disadvantage is government regulation and increased paperwork. Most government regulation of business is government regulation directed at those corporations, which must file many reports on their business operations and finances with local, state, and federal governments and make periodic reports to their stockholders. The third disadvantage, besides the difficulty of expansion, formation, and government regulation, is conflict within the corporation. Now, the pressure to increase sales revenue, reduce the corporation's expenses, and increase their overall profits often leads to stress and tension for both managers and its internal employees. The fourth disadvantage is new, we have not talked about, and that's double taxation. Unlike the sole proprietorships and partnerships, corporations must pay tax on their profits. Then the stockholders must pay a personal income tax on profits received as dividends. The fifth and final disadvantage of a corporation is the lack of secrecy. Because open corporations are required to submit those detailed reports to different government agencies and to its stockholders, they cannot keep all of their operations confidential. Some entrepreneurs choose other forms of organization to meet their special needs. Among these are the S corporations, the limited liability companies, and the not-for-profit corporations. If a corporation meets certain requirements, its directors may apply to the Internal Revenue Service for a status as an S corporation. An S corporation is a corporation that is taxed as though it were a partnership. The S corporation criteria can be seen as there are no more than 100 stockholders that are allowed. Stockholders must be individuals or estates or certain trusts. The corporation has no non-resident alien shareholders. Another criteria is that there can be only one class of outstanding stock. Another criteria to be an S corporation is that the firm must be a domestic corporation eligible to file for S corporation status, and then all stockholders must agree to the decision in which to form as an S corporation. Becoming an S corporation can be an effective way to avoid the double taxation while retaining the corporation's legal benefit of that of limited liability. With the limited liability company, this is a form of business ownership that combines the benefits of a corporation and a partnership while avoiding some of the restrictions and disadvantages those forms have when those types of ownerships. Some chief advantages of an LLC can include such as things as an LLC with at least 2 members are taxed like a partnership and thus avoid that double taxation imposed on most corporations. LLCs that have 1 member are taxed just like a sole proprietorship. Another advantage of an LLC is that, like a corporation, an LLC provides limited liability protection for acts and debts of the LLC. A third advantage is that the LLC provides more management flexibility and fewer restrictions when compared with that of those corporations. An LLC is generally run by the owners or managers who make all the management decisions. When we look at the difference between an S corporation LLC is that an LLC is not restricted to 100 stockholders. Now, the not-for-profit corporations, or sometimes just referred to as non-profit, is a corporation that's organized to provide a social, an educational, a religious, or other service rather than to earn a profit. Various charities and museums, private schools, and colleges are organized in this way primarily to ensure limited liability. Once approved by state authorities, not-for-profit corporations must meet specific Internal Revenue Service guidelines in order to obtain that tax-exempt status. Growth is a basic characteristic of any business. Larger firms generally have greater sales revenue and thus greater profit to facilitate their growth. If a business does not grow, it is actually shrinking relative to the economy it's working in. Growth is also a means by which some executives boost their personal power, their prestige, and their reputations. We have 2 different types of corporate growth we're going to talk about, and that's growth from within and mergers and acquisitions. Growth from within, most corporations grow by expanding their present operations. This growth from within can have relatively little adverse effect on that particular firm. Since this type of growth is anticipated, it can be done very gradually and planned out, which will allow the firm to be able to adapt to that growth very easily. Growth through mergers and acquisitions. Here, this is another way for a firm to grow, and that's by purchasing another company. Now, the purchase of one corporation by another is by definition called a merger. The acquisition is essentially the same thing as a merger, but the term is usually used in reference to large corporations' purchase of another corporation. And another very popular term that you'll come across in the business world is a hostile takeover. A hostile takeover is a situation in which the management and board of directors of the firm targeted for that particular acquisition disapprove of the merger of the corporations. So therefore it is a hostile acquisition or a hostile takeover. That is it for this lesson in choosing a form of business ownership in my Introduction to Business series. Hope you found this information helpful, and then you go out and do some more research and become very familiarized not only with the terms but the ins and outs and advantages and disadvantages of the different types of business ownerships that exist. Thank you, everyone. Take care.